This is the last video in our series on learning, teaching, and technology. We're going to talk about technology as well as how it might impact society and learning and teaching even. So usually when we think about technology today, we think about it as digital technologies. Those are the computers, the electronics that we have today. But technology is actually much broader. Here's one definition: the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry. Earlier technologies might be something like the pencil or the chair. Technology is much broader than just digital technologies. And remembering that helps us keep things in context, so we don't think of today as totally unique, but as a progression in technological development. So if you look at a timeline of technology, what do you think is most impactful of all time? Here's some early educational technologies. One, this is called a horn book. And paper was very expensive. And so they would do a single sheet of paper and they'd put like a cover of cow something or other over it to keep it neat. And then students could use this to see the letters and learn to read. This came up, a chalk or a slate was much better because you could write on it, you could erase it. And you could also, it was portable, right? You might be able to hand it into a teacher. So that goes from, during this time, to assess learning probably consisted of saying things out loud or maybe reading other books and such. From here, where we can actually turn something in and then the teacher can grade it. So learning becomes more of a physical artifact production. But then what happens when we get a whole class chalkboard instead of just a slate? Now we can teach the whole class at the same time instead of just teaching individual students on their slates and such. And we can show them all the whole thing. We can write things on the board that we want them to copy or memorize. So then we're going more into that acquisition model of learning. It sort of suggests that. So let's talk about some other technologies. So one of my favorite examples is the pencil. So this is early pencils, and early pencils didn't have erasers. So they had to use like little pieces of bread basically to erase the pencil. But then they invented the eraser. And think about what that might have done to how we act when we're using a pencil. When I'm using a pen, I'm very careful to not make mistakes. I'm a lot less careful when I use a pencil because I know I can erase it. It encourages us to be more accepting of mistakes, for example. It also, pencils in general, require us to learn new things in school. We had to learn pencil control, how to write with a pencil in school. Even the slates required more writing than students who use those horn books. And then we could develop workbooks where we have not just words, but we have images. And this is a different kind of learning. Learning becomes working on these things in a lot of content and book. And when it's so easy to create this content and have everyone do it, we find teachers start giving more of it. And so we give more homework, and that homework can be turned in, and that changes kind of how we see learning, as well as multiple choice tests, which were originally popular because they could be graded through Scantron. So that changed how we evaluate learning, that we really want to try to figure out how to use multiple choice tests so we can evaluate them at scale. So you see how a simple thing like a pencil has had a broad impact on what we do in teaching and learning. Now, we've talked a lot about technology as a thing, an object, a slate, a pencil. But it's not just an object. It usually also has an idea behind it. So for example, here's the Ford Model T. You could say that's a product. It's a product technology. However, what made the Ford Model T popular wasn't necessarily the car. It was the assembly line that allowed for making the car in an inexpensive way. And that is more of an idea technology. It becomes instantiated through actually building the the plant in the car, but that idea of how I can use an assembly line can then be applied to a lot of different industries. So it's an idea technology. If we take smartphones, we have the actual physical device, right? But there were similar things like BlackBerries before the iPhone, and they were never that popular. So what was it about the iPhone that really broke through and changed how we live our lives? Well, it was kind of more of an idea behind it. The BlackBerry mostly just had email and phone calls maybe, but the iPhone thought about bringing together your music and your shopping and so many pieces of your life, your maps. It includes a GPS, so many pieces of your life that can then be put into one device, which changes how we communicate and how we live. I no longer worry about how I'm going to find a place. I can just pull it up on my phone. I communicate a lot more through texting than through voice calls. So this idea, and of course it was more complex too, because we had to build up the societal structure for that to work. But ultimately, it was an idea behind this that drove the product that made it interesting. We also have things like smart boards. And if you think about the comparison between the smart board and a chalkboard or whiteboard, it can be pretty similar, or an overhead projector, for example. But what makes it different is when we have an idea and we do something different with it. So when we can do more of the interaction and the simulations and stuff, that brings the product into a new idea of doing something differently. All right. Takeaways from these videos. First, there are many different definitions of learning. And thinking of these different definitions can help us broaden our perspective and better understand what learning is, as well as how to support it through teaching. Pedagogy is that method of practice of teaching. And then technology is when we use a scientific understandings to solve a problem, whether that's through a product or it's through an idea. Thanks for watching.